I just concluded my treatment of Mount Sinai is in Arabia, and I think it has way too many problems, both archaeologically, geographically, biblically, and I think part of the problem also is that some of the traditions about Moses in Arabia come from local traditions in Arabia, and so it does not necessarily come from biblical traditions. So what I want to do now is start at the very far north and look at different Mount Sinais, and we move to the south. So here you have one theory that the Israelites came out across this very narrow piece of land, Lake Bardawil, and then came down to Jabal Halal right here. This view is problematic for two reasons. Number one, geologists now show that this barrier island, this narrow strip of land, did not complete from here to the land until maybe 2,300 years ago. This formation is actually made by the Nile silt. And only in Greek times and Roman times do we have records of people traveling on this area. Before that, there's no traveling because it did not complete from one side to the other. So it's impossible that in Moses' day one could even walk across this area. So this is impossible. The other problem, of course, is that the distance from here, the sea, to Jabal Halal is only 40 miles, 60 kilometers, and that should be over 300. So it's way too close. It doesn't fit. And then from Jabal Halal to Kadesh Barnea, 11 days journey, is a little more than a one-day journey. It's just off the map. So you can see this is does not work at all. Now, I draw your attention to another map. Here is Kadesh Barnea, or Ain Kudirat. Less than 10 kilometers to the south is another spring, Ain Kadis. And some people think because Kadis and Kadesh are one and the same word, Kadis, Arabic, Kadesh, Hebrew, that this is the spring, Ain Kadis. And so it's a possibility, but so they're very close to each other, either way. But you can see Jabal Halal is right here, very close, only a little 45 kilometers, something like that, so very close, impossible for it to be an 11-day journey. Another mountain that has been proposed by an Italian archaeologist named Emanuele Anati is a mountain that today is on the other side of the border and actually is in Israel. So it's the name is Karkom, and here you can see this mountain. Emanuele Anati has been working there for years and years and years. He's an authority on this mountain. And it definitely was a holy mountain. Many different people made offerings. There are signs of religious practices. But the dates of this are 3,400 BC, 3,000 to 2,000, nothing between 2,000 and 900. He found nothing there, but you have things before and things after 900. So it was a holy mountain based on, there were statues, images, stone pillars, things like this, but nothing in the period from 2000 to 900. So wherever you want to put Moses, there was no religious activity at this location. So some people want to say, well, let's change the history of the Bible and place Moses before 2000. And I think, again, this creates more problems than it solves. So it's an interesting mountain. It clearly was a place of worship for people who lived in the desert, but nothing that would tie it to Moses and the Hebrews. Another mountain is Jabal Sin Bishr, and this is the mountain that was proposed by an Israeli geographer, and his name is Har El, and which is a very interesting name for this geographer because Abu Nabolis knows Har El means mountain of God in Hebrew, mountain of God. That's the name. That's his name. So his name is Mountain of God, and he's looking for the mountain of God. It's very interesting. According to this theory, this is near Wadi Sudr, here Jabal Sin Bishr, and according to his theory, the Israelites crossed the Bitter Lake and came down here to Jabal Sin Bishr. Now, this would then require the Israelites to move on and up to Kadesh Barnea. And in a sense, I think this is a possibility. I would not discard this suggestion, but for my theory, rather than crossing down here at the Bitter Lakes, if you crossed up here, then you're getting closer to the distance needed for the 8 days journey. So I would say this suggestion is possible, but like all the suggested Mount Sinai's, we have no archaeological evidence, no inscriptions from the time of Moses. So there's nothing to suggest at any of these locations that Moses visited here. Nothing like this. So this is a possibility. Now, if we move to central Sinai locations, yesterday I had you go to see with me Sirbit al-Khadam in south central Sinai, which is just below Jabal Sin Bishr here. This is a beautiful wadi to travel through, Wadi Humr, and I've traveled through it when I made a film with BBC many years ago called Who Was Moses? And we traveled through here. And you can see when you travel through the wadis, you have acacia trees. And this is the most important kind of tree growing in Sinai. Sun? Khashab is sun. This kind of tree is what God will instruct Moses to use to build the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant, but we'll talk about that later. We also have beautiful bushes in this area, and as we remember, we have the bush that burnt and God spoke to Moses through it. But in any event, I took that picture because when we were in this, making this film, the director wanted to burn one of these bushes with, put benzene on it to burn it and to make the picture. And so they actually, we actually did do that. And so that's a picture I took of the burning bush that we made for BBC. Okay, there you go. So, Sirbit al-Khadam, I mentioned yesterday, but it's, there are a few people who suggest this could be Mount Sinai. And this was an important place for thousands of years where Egyptians came to mine for turquoise. And there was a temple, you can see here, the temple of Hathor. And this is the holy place where you have these pillars standing up with inscriptions on them. And here you can see a pharaoh making an offering to the goddess Hathor. She is the lady for turquoise. So you prayed to Hathor to hope that she would provide good luck when you are mining for turquoise. And turquoise was very valuable for the Egyptians. You find it in jewelry. Here you see jewelry from Tutankhamun. And it's very difficult to tell because sometimes the jewelry uses turquoise, and sometimes because turquoise is very expensive, they would make glass to look like turquoise. And so what you're seeing here is actually glass that looks like turquoise. So into these caves is where they would mine for the turquoise, and yesterday I pointed out the very old alphabetic inscriptions that were found here, suggesting that along with Egyptians who mined for turquoise were Canaanites or desert people who worked alongside with them. Now, again, from the standpoint of geography and location, Sir Beit el-Qadem is certainly possible. It fits the general parameters of travel. The main problem with it is that because the Egyptians almost every year were working there, they would bring with them a fairly large army. So it doesn't seem too likely the Hebrews would want to be at a location like this and have to deal with Egyptian soldiers. So that's one problem. But anyway, then we go down to some of the more traditional locations. Wadi Faran, very important area today, and near Wadi Faran, Jabal Sirbal. Wadi Faran is the largest oasis in all of Sinai. So you have two large oases, one at Ain Kudirat and the other Wadi Faran. So it's not surprising that God would take the Israelites to the two places in Sinai where there's the most water. Because in most of the stories in the wilderness, water is the problem. Either water that's very bad to drink or no water. These two places, of course, there is water, as you can see by all the trees. And there's a long tradition in the Orthodox tradition that there are old churches and monasteries and so on in the area here. In Wadi Faran, there still is today a monastery for nuns or a nunnery and so on. Just outside of the wadi, you can see the high peaks of Jabal Sirbal. And here you see a Google Earth image of that impressive mountain. This mountain was clearly believed to be, by many pilgrims, to be Mount Sinai. There are hundreds of inscriptions around this mountain, most of them in Armenian. So you had Armenian Christians in the 6th century, 500s, 600s, who came from Armenia and believed this was Mount Sinai. And early explorers also believed, early scientific exploration thought that this was Mount Sinai. But like the other locations, no archaeological evidence here either. So once we pass through Wadi Faran, go by Jabal Sirbal, of course the next is Jabal Musa, Mount Moses, and I'm sure many of you have gone to visit Jabal Musa. And here you can see Jabal Musa today with a Google Earth image. Catherine, St. Catherine's Monastery here. The front of the mountain is called Jabal Safsafa, and in the back is Jabal Musa, but it's one mountain with two peaks. Okay, and in the area here, I'll take you in a moment. Here you see Jabal Safsafa from the ground, and you can imagine if you turned around and looked the other way, this very large plain. This is a painting from 1842 by David Roberts, who traveled all over Egypt and Jordan and made paintings of antiquities and landscapes and so on. So this is his picture. So it's nice to see what this area looked like before there were hotels, before there were buildings. You have a very large plain, and of course the tradition would be that this is where the Israelites camped, this is where the tabernacle was set up. And of course, according to tradition, going back to the time of Constantine, that the monastery was built around the church of the burning bush. So in the back is Jabal Musa, and this is the mountain. If some of you have climbed it, that's where you went, up in the top. I have done it 4 times, And every time I've climbed it, I said, this is the last time. And I've definitely climbed it the last time. Between the two peaks, Jabal Safsafa, Jabal Musa, in the middle is this low area. And the belief is that if this is Mount Sinai, this is where Moses and the elders would have met with God in Exodus chapter 24. This is also believed to be where Elijah came when he visited Mount Horeb in the book of 1 Kings. There's a small chapel of Elijah there. So again, these are very early traditions, but like the other locations, we have no inscriptions from the days of Moses, no pottery, no archaeological evidence. Here's a small chapel at the very top of Jabal Musa, and of course the Dir, the monastery at the bottom, a very beautiful church. And this is the back of the church where you have what is believed to be the bush from the burning bush. And some years ago I was with a group, and my friend Steve reached up to touch the branch, and it was like he got fire from heaven came down. We took the picture, and we only saw this after we took the picture, so I said, maybe God was telling me something, I don't know. But in any event, so what we've done is looked at different Mount Sinai possibilities, and what I've done with this chart is to look at them one by one. Jabal allows no, it doesn't work because it's only 64 to 80 kilometers from the sea to the mountain, which should be between 290 and 354 kilometers. And the distance from there to Kadesh Barnea is okay, that works, but not this one. So you have to try to see which mountains fit all the criteria, or best fit all the criteria. Jabal Halal seems to be okay, distance from the crossing, if you move the location up to where I proposed, not down where Har El proposed. Sorry, Halal does not work, I'm sorry. Too close here. Sorry, I got mixed up. Yeah. Too close to Kadesh Barnea. Harkom is 240 kilometers from the crossing of the sea, but which sea? The Italian archaeologist did not propose which sea location, but the main problem is it's so close to Kadesh Barnea, 48 kilometers. Jabal Sin Bishr possibly works. It's okay on distance to Kadesh Barnea. It's okay if you move the location of the crossing of the sea further north, you get close to the distance. Jabal Sirbal is possible, although the distance is getting a little far for 11 days journey to Kadesh Barnea. But again, I would say not impossible. And likewise, Jabal Musa fits within the parameters of these two sets of data. So if you look at the okays, this certainly is okay. These three are all possible, but as I said, none of them have archaeological evidence for Israel. So all we can say at this point is these fit the geographical description, and we cannot go beyond that. So that's where we are. So what do I think it is? I don't know for sure, because we're going to go now to the next part, and that is to say why it doesn't matter. It would be very nice to know which Mount Sinai is, to go have a weekend and sleep there and read the Bible and be inspired, but in the end it doesn't matter. Why is that? Sinai, Mount Sinai, we're told, is the place where God's glory was revealed and God gave the law to Moses. In Exodus 24:16, we read that the glory of God settled on Mount Sinai. The Hebrew word shakan is the same as the Arabic word sakin. So the glory of God settled or dwelt, lived, came down on Mount Sinai. So we read in Exodus 24 and verse 17, "Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the sight of the people of Israel." So this is Exodus 24. Exodus 25, what follows immediately, is that we have the instructions from God to make the tabernacle. In Exodus 25 and verse 8, God says, "Let them make a sanctuary that I may dwell in their midst." The word dwell, the English word, is again the word shakan. So God wants to dwell, yuskun, sakin, live with his people. The idea is that what Israel is going to build, the tabernacle, the English word tabernacle, or a kind of tent, comes from the Hebrew word mishkan. So mishkan is a dwelling place. So it's the place where God is going to dwell with his people. So God came and dwelled on the mountain. That was wonderful. But now God's glory wants to dwell with his people and in the midst of his people. At the end of the book of Exodus, the tent, the tabernacle has been built. All the beautiful gold furnishings of the temple tabernacle built. And we read, "And the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle." So God now will dwell, live with his people. The glory of God would be in the tent and would appear to Moses and to the people of Israel. Now, what's important to realize, and here is a model of the tabernacle. It's not very impressive, but there it is. The idea is that the glory of God that was on the mountain now lives in the tent, and from this point on, Moses never again climbs Mount Sinai. If you read from this point, the book of Leviticus, the book of Numbers, Moses never goes to see the glory of God because the glory of God is in the tent of meeting or the tabernacle. So there's the point. Once the tabernacle became Israel's sanctuary, Moses never goes again to Mount Sinai. Now, for the next hundreds of years, the tabernacle is Israel's temple. It's a mobile temple, not a permanent temple. Solomon, of course, will build a permanent temple. And remember, David got the idea to build God a temple. And he spoke to Nathan the prophet and said, "I want to build a temple because here I've made a big palace for myself, and out there is the Ark of the Covenant, and it's sitting in a tent." And David was embarrassed. He's made for himself a big palace, and the glory of God is living in a small tent. Okay. Maybe you know the kind of person who buys a Lexus on Saturday and feels very guilty on Sunday and gives the priest 10 pounds offering because I bought money for myself. David felt guilty. He built a big palace for himself. Now he wants to do something for God. And God's answer is beautiful. "I have not lived in a house since the day I brought the people out of Egypt. To this day, I've been moving about in a tent for my dwelling. In all places where I have moved with all the people of Israel, did I speak a word to any of the judges of Israel, whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, saying, 'Why have you not built me a house of cedar?'" It's interesting. God says, "I don't need that. In fact, I like being able to move about and be close to people, my people." Now, what gets very interesting is that when Solomon builds the temple, it is to replace the tabernacle. When the temple is finished around 960 BC, so we're talking about several hundred years after the Exodus, the tabernacle was replaced, but the old tent was somehow incorporated into the new temple. We don't know how, but you can see very clearly here in 1 Kings chapter 8, all the elders of Israel came, and the priests took up the ark, and they brought the ark of the Lord, the tent of meeting, and all the holy vessels that were in the tent, and the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. So notice the new temple is built, but the old tabernacle, the old tent, is taken into the new temple. What did they do with it? We don't know. Did they just pack it up and leave it in a special room? We don't know. But notice that the glory of God then came there. So the glory of God, as it were, is transferred from the tabernacle into the temple. So here is one of the models of Solomon's temple that, anyway, I'm going to move on. Okay. So the glory of God that first appeared on the mountain came to dwell in the tabernacle and then was transferred when the temple was built by King Solomon. But then we read in the prophet Ezekiel that just before the temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, that the glory of God departed. Ezekiel 10, 18 and 19, Ezekiel 11, 22 through 25. So the glory of God departed. But then, of course, when we come to the New Testament, we see that the glory of God is now revealed in Jesus Christ. We read in John 1, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as the only Son of the Father, full of grace and truth." So Mount Sinai really is not that important. What's important was that God revealed his glory. But God's glory moved from Mount Sinai to the tabernacle. God's glory moved from the tabernacle to the temple. God's glory then moved into the incarnation, into Jesus Christ. And so the most important thing is, of course, that we know Jesus Christ, and in him we see the glory of God. And so where is Mount Sinai? Who cares? If you know Jesus, you know the glory of God. As an archaeologist, I'd love to know Mount Sinai, but far more important to know that the glory of God has revealed to us in Jesus Christ.